Hi, Chris Sider here, founder of Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. Today we're going to be talking about what to do when your ex only wants to have sex with you. Now, if you're anything like me, especially when you're dealing with exes, you're probably sitting there and wondering, wait, do I even have a chance of getting my ex back? Well, if that's you, I've got great news. I've actually put together a special quiz on my website designed to answer this exact question for you. Taking the quiz is super simple. Simply look in the description below this YouTube video. Click on the link that you see there. It's going to take you to a page that asks you a bunch of questions about you, your ex, and your relationship. Based on how you answer those questions, we're going to run it through an advanced algorithm to spit out a score for you. We're also going to take your answers and actually give you personalized advice on what you should be doing next. So again, if you want to take this special quiz, it should only take you about 2 minutes. Simply look in the description below this YouTube video. All right, let's actually start talking about what to do if your ex only wants to have sex with you.
Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to be talking about what to do or what it means when your ex only wants to have sex with you. That's it, they just want to have sex with you. And I thought today we'd start off by answering or asking a few important questions. Why? Why do they only want to have sex with you? Why don't they want more? What are they thinking? What causes them to come to this conclusion? And believe it or not, I've found 5 distinct thoughts or ideas that your ex can potentially have that can ultimately lead them to this conclusion where they just want to reach out to you. They just want to have sex. That's their entire motivation. So the first thing is you're familiar. As human beings, we're often defined by our patterns, the patterns that we sort of set ourselves into, and that certainly can apply to our relationships, especially if you've gotten into the pattern of having sex time and time again, or the pattern has been suddenly interrupted. You've gone through this breakup and, they're sort of going out there and thinking, you know what, I kind of miss that pattern. I kind of want that pattern to continue. They can reach out to you to sort of appease that side of themselves. The next thought that they can potentially have that will only make them want to have sex with you is that you're available. So what do I mean by this? Well, oftentimes when someone breaks up with you, it's essentially the same thing as them saying, hey, I think I can do better than you. I can find someone else to meet my needs better. Right? And so they can break up with you under this pretense, and then when they actually go out there and start experiencing or start trying to find someone better, it's a little bit more difficult than they think. So what do? Well, they come to the person that they think is available or maybe potentially even easy. I know that's maybe not a nice thing to hear, but they want someone available. They want someone easy, especially if they've sort of thought wrong. And sometimes men and women are stubborn and we don't admit mistakes when we make them. So that's another potential thought that they could be having. Another thing is, hey, they want closure. You've heard of breakup sex, right? It's the sort of agreement that you come to after you go through a breakup, just one last thing, one last hurrah. Well, sometimes what I find happens is you won't have breakup sex right when you're breaking up. You have it a few days, a few weeks, maybe even a month or two after you break up. And a lot of times it can be for closure. I find sometimes also it can be like them trying to sort of, if you go back to the last one, the available thing, it could be them sort of reaching out to you, seeing like, okay, well, maybe that person or maybe my ex wasn't as bad as I thought. But most of the time, what ends up happening is that they sleep with you and they gain some type of closure. The fourth thing is they miss the sex, right? And oftentimes when we think back to our relationships, and we're going to talk about this in just a little moment, we think back to the best parts of the relationship. And a lot of times the best parts can be the parts where you had the best sex of the relationship. And so what can happen sometimes is that when they've broken up with you and they're trying to move on, every once in a while their mind will wander back to the experience they had with you, where they were having sex and it felt good, and they're like, oh, you know what, I kind of miss that. They often overlook the bad aspects of the relationship. And again, I'm going to talk about this in depth in just a moment, but what can happen is they can come back to you to have sex with you because they actually miss the sex itself. The fifth thing, and the fifth and final thought I've seen to find exes have, is the idealization of the relationship. We have a tendency to put the relationship on a pedestal. And a lot of this has to do with this idea of the peak end rule. Now, if you don't know what the peak end rule, it's pretty simple. Rather than remembering an experience based on every aspect of the experience, all of the highs, all of the lows, we actually remember the experience based on two distinct points. The peak of the experience, as you can see there, the most satisfying aspect of the experience, and the end of the experience. And so what happens sometimes when you're looking at the idealization of the relationship, what happens is you can find they will not even think about the end, because often the end, when you're going through a breakup, is the most negative aspect of the relationship. It's the worst part of the relationship in many cases. They forget about that and completely just look at the peak of the relationship and start thinking of all the great times you had sex, all of the great experiences that you did together, all of the great firsts you had together. And they tend to idealize the relationship, and they can come back and have sex with you because they're not looking at the relationship kind of as a fair experience. They're looking at it with rose-colored glasses all of the time. Now, this kind of leads us to ask another interesting question. Well, should you sleep with your ex? Is it a great way to try to get them back? No, it's not. And I'm going to tell you why. What often happens when you sleep with an ex, well, first off, before I actually answer this question, let's actually look at how many people often sleep with exes, right? So, I've looked at multiple different polls who have asked this question to individuals, and I stumbled across actually two legitimate ones. This is the first one. This was a poll done by the Associated Press. I think there was about 1,200 people that they surveyed. They asked them a lot of questions about breakups. Some interesting ones, like how many people stayed friends. Apparently 51% of people stay friends. Do you ever listen to songs because it reminds you of an ex? 45% of people say yes. Have you ever gotten back together with an ex after a breakup? 41% of people say yes. But really, for our purposes, what matters here is, have you ever had sex with an ex after a breakup? And 36% of people said yes. The other poll, which I actually don't have screenshotted, I'm sorry, I forgot to put that in the presentation, actually stated that 44% of people have slept with an ex after a breakup. So it's a little bit more common than you'd originally think, and a lot of it has to do with those five things I just covered. But really, I think the outcome that ultimately happens when you sleep with your ex, at least from working with multiple the individuals on our private Facebook group and my own personal clients that I see happening, is when you sleep with an ex, it opens up the friends with benefits sort of relationship. Now, how does that work? Why does it open up the friends with benefits relationship? Well, believe it or not, there's a line. What do I mean by that? Well, there's kind of the proverbial line in the sand, and if you cross this line, it kind of shows your ex what's possible. So I actually put a graphic up here to kind of illustrate this point. So on the left, you have an ex who is sort of understands where your line is. There's the line, they're saying, okay, if I cross this line, they're not going to sleep with me. They're only going to sleep with me if I'm in a relationship with them. When you go through a breakup and you actually do sleep with your ex, when there's not a relationship in place, when you're both single, they cross that proverbial line in the sand and they understand what's possible. They start thinking, oh, they will sleep with me without being in a relationship. And I think that's interesting because when it comes to friends with benefits, when you're looking at men or women who want to enact a friends with benefits relationship with you, they want to do it because it's the best outcome they could possibly imagine. And once you have, I guess, crossed the line that you see here, they start to see what's possible and they start to take advantage of that. You've sort of tipped your hand, if you will. So oftentimes that's what happens when you do sleep with an ex. It actually kind of paints you into a corner and you dig yourself into a hole, and you sort of have to work harder to dig yourself out of that hole, which is why I actually recommend never to sleep with an ex unless you have a relationship or some type of an agreement for a relationship in place. So that is why your ex only wants to have sex with you.